So what am I supposed to do with this kid, right?
Hey, you're gonna make a lot of money off it.
Well,
Welcome to the Geological Eras Tour. My name is Benjamin Moeller, and I'll be your host. You can support the show and all of the Parent-Teacher Guide to Paleontology on patreon.com/ptpaleo and on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Epitaph 5, Fossil Hunter's Tools. At time of recording, I'm getting ready to ship off for Menifee Expedition 2025. This is a trip that I've been taking pretty much every year since 2011, minus 2020 for obvious reasons, into the San Juan Basin of northwestern New Mexico, where we're looking at fossils in the Menifee Formation, which are between 78.5 and 84 million years old. Since I'm obviously going to be away from my work computer and unable to do my microstream, I'm recording episodes of the Geological Eras Tour, and to cut myself a little bit of slack, I thought I'd pick an easy topic and talk about the tools that I use when I'm working in the field. So if you'd like to see video of what the Menifee Expedition looks like, you can search up on YouTube Menifee Expedition, Menefee, and you'll be able to find videos from previous years, 2024, 2023, and so on. If you're listening to this a few months after May 2025, videos of the expedition that I'm about to go on should be available for free on YouTube to watch as well. So, what are the tools of the trade? I'm going to start off by talking about clothing and safety apparel. I'm a pretty pale individual. I happen to be descended from a Dutch immigrant. If you've seen the photo of me as a child that I use for the title image of the Eras Tour podcast, I'm not quite that pale. There is a little bit of bloom on there, but I'm pretty pale. And so the first thing that I have to have that I can't do any field work without is sunscreen. And the most effective stuff that I've found is mineral sunscreen. I should just say off the top, I'm going to be using some product names, maybe reference some stores. I'm not sponsored by anybody for anything, so we'll get that out of the way. The stuff that I use is called Blue Lizard. It's an Australian mineral sunscreen that turns my skin even more pale, actually, but it's really effective at protecting my skin from burns, which is what's important, right? Being cosmetically attractive in the field is not, strictly speaking, necessary. And when I'm doing recordings in the field, when you see me doing Menifee Expedition videos, you'll usually see me recording the intro where you can see my face before I've put on any sunscreen for the day, and then for the rest of the video, you're not seeing what I look like, and it's because I look horrendous. I look like a ghost. Now, I happen to really dislike the feeling of having sunscreen on my skin. I hate the way that it's oily and greasy, and I've never really found a product that's both effective and not gross feeling, but it's non-negotiable. So sunscreen is a must. But even better than sunscreen is just simply covering up as much of your skin as possible. So I'm always wearing long pants and long sleeves. I get basically all of my field clothes from REI. I use a sort of runner's top that's lightweight, that breathes well, sweat wicking, which is good, and it's long sleeve, and it's even got a hood built into it. So I put that up. I have to braid my hair and tuck that down, and then a hat on top to really protect as much of my skin as possible. And then I'll put sunscreen on my hands, on my face, ears, and neck. So as far as gloves go, I have kind of a specific preference. I use carpenter gloves, which happen to be covered on 3 of the fingers, but uncovered, fingerless, on the thumb and index finger. And so that gives me enough protection so that if I'm hammering on something and I happen to hit 3 out of my 5 fingers, they're pretty well protected. But I need the dexterity of my thumb and forefinger when I'm picking up rocks on the ground that I think might be fossils and trying to turn them over. So having a fully covered 5-fingered glove doesn't really work for me. Fully fingerless also isn't really great. So carpenter's gloves gives you an interesting mix, and it also gives you a really interesting tan. Even though I'm putting sunscreen on my hands, I definitely have some interesting tan lines, we'll say. Something that I've experimented with in the past that I'm definitely going to do again this year is actually putting on nail polish. So for those 2 fingers that are exposed, which happen to also be the ones that tend to get hit by hammers by accident, you're taking a lot of damage to your nails, and at the end of, 2 weeks in the field, they tend to get pretty scratched up. And so I've experimented before with putting on nail polish that is especially there for protection. I've got, again, I'm not sponsored, I just picked up some Tough as Nails to put on, a black color that worked really well last time. I think it's going to work out really well this time as well. And again, it's not a fashion statement, but it is I'll say positive side effect that when I'm posting photos in the field that show my hands in them and I've got nail polish on, people react kind of a weird way. There's a certain type of internet dweeb who hates the idea of like women or queer people doing field paleontology that just it drives them nuts. And if I can make those people's lives miserable just by existing, I absolutely will. Also, wearing nail polish doesn't mean that you're a woman or queer or anything like that. In this case, it is literally like a safety and protection thing. Hats are great, hats are mandatory. I tend to wear baseball caps, and I'll also mix it with some kind of garment or a scarf or something to go over my neck just to give absolutely as much skin coverage as possible. And I don't really have the money to fully coordinate like a look as far as from head to toe, my hat, neckerchief, top, pants, boots, whatever. Boots, by the way, I don't really have a super good preference for. I wouldn't say that there's a company that has a product that I really like more than any other, but you do need to have good boots, having traction when you're walking out in the field, particularly in places like the Menifee where it can be really sandy, or you can have sharp, pieces of siderite concretions, ironstone everywhere. You definitely want to have your feet protected. I don't have the money to like fully coordinate stuff, so I look like I'm throwing random stuff together, which I literally am. So again, I'm not a fashion influencer by any means. I consider myself to be an anti-influencer in the way that I'm kind of almost dressing poorly on purpose for this, and I'm not making myself look good for camera, but really only showing myself when I look at my absolute worst, right? It's not really easy, or I'll say it's hard on my skin to shave in the field. It's doable, but just because of all the grease and sweat and stuff, doing so tends to give me, pimples and acne and stuff. So I just kind of let it go over the 2 weeks or so that I'm out there, and every single day I look worse and worse because my facial hair, I think, is awful. So I think of myself as being kind of an anti-influencer in that way, in that I'm really only showing myself on camera when I look my worst, and that's when I'm at work. Now let's talk about tools. The stereotypical tools that you always see in movies when you're looking at paleontologists or archaeologists, which we're commonly confused with. It's basically two things: a double-headed pickaxe and a brush. Brushes are absolutely mandatory. We always have them. Brushes, that is real. The double-ended pick, not so much. So we do have rock hammers which have a pointy end on one side and sort of a flat hammer on the other. Again, not sponsored. I use Estwing because that's what I've got available to me. And if we're working anywhere near a fossil, I want to have the amount of precision to be able to confidently feel like I'm not about to crash through a fossil and break it unnecessarily. We can fix breaks. We can do it in the field. We can do it in the lab. But the fewer times you break the fossil, the better. So instead of using a double-ended pick, if I'm anywhere near where I suspect fossils are going to be, I'm using the flat end and actually a variety of chisels and screwdrivers. The screwdrivers are mostly flatheads. You can use Phillips as well for particular situations, but flatheads and then blade-like chisels are really useful when you're working in stuff like shales and mudstones and sandstones and things like that, because in these sedimentary rocks there are natural breaking points that go along flat planes. Sometimes they're flat, sometimes they're really twisted and messed up, but roughly approximately flat surfaces is where they'll kind of separate on. The cleavage points is what we would call that. And so having something that's flat really makes it easy to chip off in a controlled manner, little bits of rock at a time. The closer we get to the fossils, including in the field and in the lab, the smaller the tools become. So at a certain point, the screwdrivers and chisels go away, and we switch to basically dental tools, actually. Small scrapers, sometimes X-Acto knives. And then when you're doing preparation in the laboratory, we're using air scribes. So a tiny needle that is not even making direct contact with anything. It's actually pushing a concentrated stream of air. And that air is what's pushing off small amounts of rock and sand and other particles at a time. Now you want to be particular if you're thinking of picking up tools for doing field paleontology. You want to get screwdrivers and chisels that are metal all the way through, not ones that have plastic handles, because those tend to shatter, and we have definitely broken a lot of field tools out there over time. Now, having chisels with kind of a broad head as well are also really useful, and we also bring out just regular mallets and other types of hammers, because once you've gotten around the fossil in a more delicate mode of excavation, and you start moving down in the pedestaling process, again, you can look up my videos to see examples of how this works, you're going to want to be able to get in more power to be able to break through thicker sections of rock that don't have fossils in them. So a variety of tools are necessary for doing that part. And then, of course, as you're working, you always want to be brushing the excess rock out of the way. The lady who first taught me field skills in my first excavation when I was 8 years old, Sharon, she told me that a clean workspace is a happy workspace, and that is absolutely true. You're just not going to know if you've freshly exposed a fossil unless you're continuously cleaning your work area. And if you're working in kind of a network of people in a particular dig site, if you've got 4 or 5 people working on the same thing, you're going to kind of set up a chain where one person is brushing stuff down to the next, down to the next, down to the next, and eventually either shoveling it out of the way or pushing it into a particular refuse pile. Sometimes you happen to come across a broken fossil and you feel like there might be a piece that was accidentally broken off and then swept away without noticing. So you do want to be particular about where you're putting your refuse so that if there's something that's lost, you know exactly where to go to try and find it. That's not really a field tool tip, that's more of a field excavation tip. Whatever. I'm full of information and I can't shut up. In certain circumstances where you have a lot of rock that needs to be removed, a lot of really tough stuff that doesn't have fossils in it that we can move kind of more quickly through, you're not just going to use your rock picks, but you might also be using battery-operated drills. We've used rock saws in the past. Sometimes you need to use actual like bulldozers and scrapers and things like that. Those are for pretty big sites and expeditions that have a lot of funding, we'll say. Very occasionally you hear about people using helicopters to evacuate fossils from the field because it just takes too much manpower to move multi-thousand-pound blocks out of a quarry to where they need to go. So all of that, is in the mix depending on the actual job at hand. We have a number of tools at our disposal for protecting fossils, so glue is one of the most important things, and we do literally glue fossils back together. We use different varieties of cyanoacrylate. Butevar is one of the names for this, and there's a couple of different varieties, and they have to be mixed in a powder form with acetone in order to create different consistencies. Depending, again, on the task at hand, you might want a really thick glue in order to unite 2 pieces of a bone that need to go together. Sometimes you want the glue to penetrate down into the inside, the core of a bone in order to keep it together if it's really flaky and about to fall apart. So in that case, you're going to use a thinner glue. When we're in the jacketing process, you're going to use everything from toilet paper, which needs to get wet. So water, obviously, is one of the things that you need. Water is one of the most important tools, kind of up there with sunscreen. I can't believe it took me this long to mention water. Also, first aid kits and knowing how to use a first aid kit. So one of the things that we look for when selecting volunteers for the Menifee expedition is like first aid certifications and other types of competencies. Anyway, when jacketing a fossil, wet paper towel, or toilet paper. Sometimes people use aluminum foil. I think that's kind of a waste of money. Also, certain repositories, the places that accept fossils for long-term curation, don't want aluminum foil because bugs can sometimes get in there. So there are different preferences depending on where these fossils are destined to go. And then you're going to need plaster of Paris and more water in order to mix up plaster, which burlap bandages are then rolled into. The bandages need to get wet first and then squeezed out, rolled in the plaster, and then applied to the cap, which is that wet paper towel or aluminum foil. And then that stuff sits and dries and hardens, and then you're going to be using your variety of tools to undercut that jacket, to cut it off from the pedestal it's sitting on, and then flip it over. We also employ a variety of technology in this work, so one of my most important field tools is just my regular everyday cell phone, because it allows me to take photography and videos. When you're taking photos of fossils in the field, you always need to have a scale bar with you so that when you're looking at this stuff later, you know how large the material is that you were referencing. In addition to that, being able to check GPS locations. Sometimes we use dedicated, especially in the past, we had dedicated GPS devices. Nowadays, most cell phones can do this as well. So checking to make sure that you are actually within your permitted area when you're collecting a fossil is very essential for keeping yourself, out of prison. You don't want to be excavating somewhere you don't have permission to. We're also at the point now where you can use your phone to do things like photogrammetric scans and LiDAR scans. So I use an app called WiDAR, which allows me to take photogrammetric scans, basically create 3D models using photos. And I'm doing that not just of fossils once they've been collected and cleaned and glued back together, but I also tend to scan stuff when it's in place, when it's in situ, in order to get kind of a look at what the excavation site, the actual dig area looks like. And then I'm using those 3D models not just for my own purposes, but I'm also integrating them into Shadowbox, which is my free virtual museum you can download on Steam. There's links everywhere. I'll put it in the description of this video if you're watching it on YouTube. If you're listening to this in Shadowbox, you already know how to access Shadowbox, so good for you. One last thought before I go. One of the other most important tools that we have on the field team is each other, right? It's not really nice to refer to volunteers as tools, but you should think of it in that way, in that each person on a crew is contributing something. Either it's physical prowess if we're just moving stuff around, it can be patience and endurance if we're talking about moving tiny amounts of rock at a time in order to uncover fossils. It can be pattern recognition to be able to spot stuff, having extra pairs of eyes, and all of these things contribute to making the actual project move forward. And that's not even getting into the unique perspectives that each person brings into the field. Even people who aren't paleontologists by trade are often bringing something that I might not have known previously in my own experience. So again, one of the greatest assets that we have as a field team on the Menifee expedition is each other. And one of the things that I look most forward to on the field expedition is all the time that I get to spend talking with experts, not just in paleontology, but again, people come from all different types of backgrounds and learning from people about the work that they do and maybe picking up on small ideas where we can integrate things that other people have learned in other fields into how we do things. So that's where I want to leave it. I have probably forgot many things that I'm going to be cursing myself out for forgetting mentioning, but I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So again, I hope that if you're interested in seeing what actual field paleontology looks like, you can look up these videos. If you'd like to support the project and you want to see what's happening right now, if you're watching this as it premieres in mid-May, you can subscribe to the Parent-Teacher Guide to Paleontology. That's patreon.com/ptpaleo. And if you subscribe as an expedition donor, you can watch these videos the day that they come out, the day that I'm shooting them. And if you don't have the ability to contribute $12 a month, I totally understand. Just wait a little while and they will debut on YouTube after the dust has settled and I've had time to review the material and it's not quite as fresh. You'll still get to see it, but it's not as exciting. And of course, I'd like to share my appreciation for everyone who contributes to PT Paleo, everyone who shares these videos, everyone who plays Shadowbox and then tells your friends about it. All of that stuff helps me do my job. All of that stuff helps push me and the field forward, so I greatly appreciate it. I'll talk to you next time.